Good morning, afternoon, good evening, based on the time you are. Welcome to Development course on coolchat.com. Today we are on week 3. If you are accessing on YouTube, this is a course taught on coolchat.com. And to access the course, you go to courses, then take courses there, but we are taking web development. We are taking course. We are on week 3. We've already studied week 1 and 2, so that's why I make reference to the content before watching this is your first time. So what are we going to study in week 3? We will learn about arrays, we will learn about constant and global variables, then learn about functions, then we will introduce, then the subject will go deeper into the classes. So that's basically what we of the course. You just click on the graduation cap, which is just like 30 big content. So you just click on it. In page of the course, if you've logged into coolchat.com already, there is an instructor, so you can log in. You have an account. If you don't have an account, you have to create an account. Then you log in, then you send me a chat message, reply you. So what is an array? So array is a data structure that stores a set of values. Each value in there that you can use to access it. Okay. So just like the way we have the bookshelf, it's the same thing with an array. So we put the content in each of their shelf. In the library, for example, those shelves have been numbered. So it will be easy to access the book. So if the librarian tells you that I'll go to this book, go to this section of the library at this particular shelf number, you'll be able to know that this is where I can find the book. So the same thing with an array. So array stores value. So in this case, when you are comparing to the library, it's the book that is being stored there. Then we have array index, which is the shelf number. So you have the index where you can access the content of your array. So you need to have the number. Then when you are updating, you have to take note of the number, which is the index where you are storing the array contents inside. Now, the difference between the library and the array one, the index start from 0. So you cannot decide what kind of index you want to give. The index start from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. So the last index of an array is less than 1. So if an array is of size 10, the last index will be 9 because we started numbering from 0. Okay. So to access the content of the array, we still use the index. So if, for example, we store something in array at index 0, if we want to access its content, we have to use index 0 to access the content we put in that array. Array is very, very beneficial in programming because sometimes you have to temporarily store some information on the computer and you need to store a huge data of information. For example, if you have maybe you need to create store maybe about 50 names of students. Now, if you don't use the array, then you have to declare 50 variable names for each of the students. But with an array, you can just declare one array variable. Then you can store each of the 50 students in each of the indexes. So like 50 students, for example, the first student will be at index 0, the second will be at index 1, the third will be at index 2, the fourth will be as index 3, and so on. So with just one declared variable, which is an array, you can store all the 50 students inside without having to declare each of the variables for to storage of the students. Okay, so that's the one advantage of an array. So in our development, when we start the application development, you have our one file for our database and one file for our functions. Then you have our interfaces. Now we don't put database functions in the interfaces. It's only going to be only the interface there that will put code, the HTML and the display content. So that the database file will be on its own and the functions files will be on its own. So in the database file, normally when we fetch the content from the database, you process them and put them in an array so that the interface page, you can call that array uh, function to fetch the data from the database. Then we can process that kind of information. So the database uh, file will be on its own. When we access those information, we put them in an array and we pass it to where we'll be doing our interface. Then we can process the content of the array. So you need to pay much attention to this array because we'll be using them in our subsequent weeks. Okay, so to declare an array, you give the array a name, just like we give variable names. They follow the same rules of naming. You cannot start a variable name with digits. It's the same thing. You can have space between the variable names. It's the same thing. You can have keywords in the variable name. It's the same thing. So so you declare your variable name, then you write equal to, then this is what makes that variable an array. So you write that it is equal to array, then you close your syntax with a semicolon. So this makes with this the PHP compiler knows that this variable is for an array. You'll be storing values inside. Okay, so if you are using it in a different way, the compiler will give you an error because you declare it as an array, so you need to use it as an array. Okay, so to store a value at a particular index is just a variable name. It's just a variable name, then the square brackets, then you put in the index where you want to store the value, then equal to, then you assign the value inside. Remember, arrays should be of the same data types. So if you decide to put integer values in the array, they all must be integer values. If you decide to put string data in the array, they must all be string in that order. So in other programming languages, you need to even specify the type of data of the array. But in PHP, you don't need to specify. Once you put in one variable, PHP determine what kind of data types you are going to store there. So to be expecting that subsequent ones should be of the same data type. Okay, so let's take an example. So this one is storing a value in the array. Like I have explained, you need a variable name for the array. You need a square bracket. Then in the square bracket should be the index where you want to put the store the value. Then equal to, then you write the value there. And as we already know, every syntax programming will end with a semicolon. So you end with a semicolon. So this is an example where we are storing student names in our array. So we declare student names is equal to array. So this makes it that this variable is of the type array. Then we have at index 0, we store G inside. At index 1, we store Kofi. At index 2, we store Amma. At index 3, we store Bote. At index 4, we store Adua. So as you can see, the last index is 4. So what's the size of the array you can get? Because last index is 1 less, so the size will be 1 plus. So if you count, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's the size of the array. So the size of the array is 5. And at index 0, what value do you think we can get? We can get at J. At index 1, we can get Kofi. At index 2, we can get Amber. At index 3, we can get Bote. At index 4, we can get Ajua. So that's how it is. So if you echo students underscore names 0 and square bracket 0, it will display at J because that's the content of index 0. If you echo student underscore names at index 1, it will display Kofi because that's the content of it. If you echo student underscore names 2, it will display Amma and so on. Okay, so let's take a practical example. So this is explanation. So what I'm explaining is what is over there. Okay, so we create our example scripts so that you can see. So I'm going to create a folder in my htdocs and name it with I can be doing the examples in that week. So I go to my C drive. So I've been saying those who might be accessing this material the first time, you need to consider week 1 and 2. We talk about how you can install them and how you can create your projects and how you can access your pages. So you need to refer to those weeks. So in the exam, we put our PHP code in the htdocs. So if you go to your C drive in exam, then htdocs. In the htdocs, if you want your pages to be in a particular, your project to be in a folder, then you have to create a folder in the htdocs. So I'll be creating folders based on the week of our study so that if you want to make reference to a particular thing we did in a particular week, then you know where you can get those files. Okay, but I will be deleting some of the code and doing modification to it. But you can create your PHP script by maybe example 1, example 2, example 3 so that you always have the files with you. So in week 2, we create our folder with 3. Okay, we are in week 3, so we create our folder with 3. Okay. So in this week 3, I'll create an index file where I'll be putting my coding examples inside. For me, I will create index.php, but for you, you can create examples. So you can have like example 1.php, example 2.php, example 3.php, so that you don't need to delete the code, so that you can have code examples to refer to them. Okay. For me, I will delete the previous code. I will delete the previous code. So, C drive htdocs with the index.php. Okay. So we take our example for the array. So we have our PHP here. So PHP. So as we've already explained, we start with less than question mark, then PHP, then we end with less than greater than. Okay. So now we declare our array. So we can write maybe names. Okay, it's equal to array. Okay. Now we said to assign the values to use the indexes. So names at index 0. We decide to put, and it's a string, names are string variables, so we put them double quotation. Okay, so we put maybe Kofi at index 1. We put Amma at index 2. We put Ade index 3, we put Mary. Put Mary. Okay. So if you display names at index 0, it will display Kofi. So let's do that and see. So we have echo. Okay. So we can have. Okay, so if we decide to put PHP written on the PHP, then we can write P. Okay. Then echo names at index 0. In our PHP, then in our HTML. So like I said that it is nicer to put your PHP script in your HTML so that you can easily understand your code. If you put you just echo P, most often it's difficult. But if you write in HTML, you can know where the tags are ending by just clicking on the tag, and you can see that it shows you where it is ending. So it's advisable to write your PHP script in the HTML, but not put all the HTML code in an echo quotation. Okay, so here we are displaying our names at index 0. Index 0 we store Kofi inside. So if we display that array content at index 0, we are going to get Kofi. So we can run our code and see. So we have localhost 2 slash no, with 3. Why do I keep on saying slash with 3? So as you can see, it has displayed Kofi. Then if we decide to show that of all the content up to with 3, and just copy it, just change the index. At index 1, index 2, index 3. Now remember, if you are accessing an array which index has not been assigned, you get out of boundary, because you don't have that index. For example, if we decide, okay, you let me run this, then I will take an example where the array size is beyond what we define, because we don't have, for example, we don't have at index 4, so you can't access array at index 4 and then get an error. Okay, so at index 0 we have Kofi, at index 1 we have Bamba, at index 3 we have Aji, at index 4, at index 2 we have Aji, at index 4 we have Mary. So now if you write array at index 4, let's see what happens. Okay, so you can see that it says undefined offset 4 in the line. That's the error, because we don't have index 4, so it's out of bound, because you only have from 0 to 3. So take note, if you are accessing the array, make sure that it's within the boundary where you have that the boundary where you have all the indexes. If you go at an index which has not have any value, you get an error. Okay, so that's an explanation of our array. So you declare an array by the variable name, then you write equal to an array. So PHP knows that it's an array variable. And to assign a value to your array, you use the indexes. So at index 0, you can put the value there. At index 1, you can put the value there. And you have to assign the same data type to your array. So if the first one is of string, the subsequent ones must be string. If it's of integer, the subsequent ones must be integers. Okay. Now you shouldn't go beyond the array size that you specify, and then you get an error, offset error, because you haven't assigned that value yet. So you are going beyond the size of the array. Okay. So that's it. So we'll continue our course content. So I've explained this once already. Now you can add more value to the array using the array push. So array push is a already written function in PHP. So if you call array push, it means that you are inserting an array a value at the subsequent index. So if you call array push and then your last index was 3, then it will put a value in your last index in your index 4. If you do another one, it will put the value in index 5 and so on. So based on your previous index, if you don't have any index at all, it will start from 0. So the array push you put the value at 0. The next one you put the value at 1 and so on. So we use the array push to put values in our array. So that one we don't specify the index, it will automatically know the previous, the last index or the starting index, and it can be putting the values inside. So the array push takes 2 arguments. It takes the array name, so the array name that you want to put the values inside, then the value you want to put in that array. So that's it. So array push, you call the function array push. It's already written function in PHP, so it is going to be blue. So it's a keyword in PHP, so it's going to be blue. Then the rest will be the array name, then the value you want to assign to the array. So for example, if you want to add another name to our names, we can call them array push. So you can have array push. Okay. Now you can see that it is colored blue because it's a function written in PHP. So that is a keyword. So now our array name is names. So we have names. And what do we want to add? So maybe I want to add Godwin to our array. So Godwin. Okay. So now at index 4, I'm going to have Godwin because my previous index is 3. So when I call the array push to add at index 4, the name Godwin. So if I copy and I paste index 4 value, so if I paste index 4, I will have Godwin displayed because I've added the Godwin to my array. So if I call, okay, as you can see, so I've added Godwin. So if I want to add another one, so maybe what name should I use? Maybe Adobe. Okay, so that one is at index 5. So if I call it at index 5, then I will have my value name Adobe. Okay, so that's it. So that's just array is not so difficult. You need to declare the variable as an array. Then you put the array values at each of their indexes. Then you can access them also by their index. So we continue. So that's the array push. It takes the name of the array, then the value of the key. The function name is array push. Okay, we've done accessing the value of an array already. Okay, now you can also use a loop to access the value of an array so that you don't have to call them one by one. So in our previous, I think week 2, we talk about loop. So you can use the for loop or a while loop or any loop you want to use. You can access them by a loop. Then you can use a for each also loop. So you will use both. You can use a while loop as well. So any one you want to use. So if you want to use a for loop, so you can call, so we can start our PHP. Now, if you have an array that you don't know its size, you can get the size of the array using the function count. So the count is the name of our array. We count how many content we have in the array. So that one you can know the size. So you know where to start for your loop and where to end. So you know that a for loop starts since our index start from 0, our for loop should start from 0. Unless you are starting to display the content from the last one to the lowest one, then your loop will start from the last index, which will be the size of the array minus 1, then to 0. Okay, but if you are starting from the lowest index to the last index, then you have to start from 0. So to call the last content, so maybe the size of the array, to know the size of the array, is going to record the function count, then the name of the array. So our array name is names. Okay, so this will return how many elements. Okay, so each of the content of the array, we refer to them as elements. So if you want to know the size of the array or how many elements we have in our array, then you can call this count function. So the count is the argument is the name of your array. You return the size of the array. So in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, then we have 5, then we have 6. So our count names will return 6, which is the size of an array. Okay. Now, if you want to write a for loop, last week we said to write a for loop, you start with 4. Then you initialize your control variable. So our I will be 0. We are starting from index 0, so our I will be 0. Then our I should be less than, remember, it should be less than the size because our last index is 1 less than the size. So it shouldn't be less than or equal to, it should be less than the size. Then we'll increase our I, so I plus plus. Okay. Then we can display, so display. So I have to close the PHP and open it again. So in between it, I can put my HTML code inside. So in the HTML code, I have something like that right here. Okay. Now this index is now our variable I. So we don't specify a particular index here. It's going to be the variable I. So at the time I is 0, it should be index 0. At the time I is 1, it will be index 1. At the time I is 2, it's going to be index 2. At the time I is 3, it's going to be at index 3, and so on. Okay. So here there is no index specified. The index will be the value of our I. And like we explained last week, for the for loop, it's increment. So at each repetition, then our I increase because of what we wrote here. We say I plus plus, so our I will be increasing at each of the loop until this condition becomes false, which is when our I gets to the value which is equal to the size of the array, then our for loop will quit. Okay, so if I run this, we already echo this one. So the for loop will also echo the same thing, but this time we are not using the index numbers, we are using the for loop. Okay, so as you can see, the for loop. So at index 0, we display this. When our I is 0, we display this. When our I is 1, we display this. When our I is 2, we display this. When our I is 3, we display this. When our I is 4, when our I is 5, we display this. When our I is 6, we display this. So when our I gets to 7, the loop will end because we said our I should be less than the size of the array, and the size of the array is 6. Okay. So someone may also write the array so that it will not first of all get the size of the array. So in that case, the person can just write this over here because that will return the size of the array. So instead of writing size here, another person can also write count size of the array because that will also return the value. So we can have I less than the value that comes with return. So they both work in the same way. If you want to process that value you get in the count function, maybe that number you need it to do something, then you can call that function and manipulate it. Sometimes you may want to check if the array is not empty. And you can get the size of the array, then you know if it is one or two, or then you know that the array is not empty. But if it is zero, then you know that the array is empty. So based on what you are doing, how useful that count function can be. Okay. So you choose however you want to do it. You can either get a size and use it in the loop, or you can first of all use the count function straightforward. Okay. So like I told you, you can as well use a while loop. We all do the same thing. So in the while loop, it's just going to be while our you first of all have to initialize your I. So in the while loop, our I, you have to equate it to 0. Okay. So then while our I is less than, we have while our I is less than the side of our array. So side. Okay. Now, in order for the I to stop at a particular time, we need to increase our I. So we have our I plus plus over here. So last week we talked about the while loop as well. So in the while loop, we have our I starting from 0 because we initialize it to 0. So the second loop, I will increase to 1. So it becomes 1 here and so on until the condition here is false. Then our while loop will end. So you can use a while loop as well. So the point is that you can use any loop to access them. The key thing is that we need the index there, our index. So our index is our I. So you'll be increasing the index, you'll be increasing the index until it gets to the last index, then the loop ends. Okay, so that's it. Then we can as well use a for each. So for each is also simple. So for each, we just write for each. The for each is a keyword. So for each, then the name of the array. So our arrays names. Then as. Okay, so you specify. So here you specify maybe some term, a variable for each of the names. So here I can say for each of the content to be named. Okay, and I can just echo it back. Okay, so echo. So here I want it to be this. So write it in P. So my P echo my name variable end of my P. Okay. So here in there for each. So each of the index of the array is now by I'll declare it as a variable name. So each will have the variable each of the value will be in the keyword name. So I can be accessing them. So if I say so for each should be each of the index. So it will go from index 0 to index 1 and so on. So for each of the array it should be of this variable name. So I can be displaying each of them in that way. So you can as well use each also. So anyhow you want it. So you can use it for each. And you echo it. So echo. So you echo it. Okay. So anyhow you want it. So you can either use for each. You can either use for loop. You can either use while loop. So however you want to access your lesson. So the key thing is that you need to access them by index if you are using the for or while loop. So you have your I variable to be your index. So in the loop you'll be increasing the I value until you get to the last index. Then for each you just of the value you just refer to it by giving a variable to it, the as. So you give it a variable as, and then you give a variable name you want to have. Remember, the variable name should not be the same as this. Most often, the singular version of the plural of the array. So, for example, if you have students here, and most programmers will name it a singular version of the plural. So, if you have students here, it will be for each student as student. If you have maybe pens, then it should be for each pens as pen. And so if you have books, then for each books as book. Okay, so basically that's how many programmers declare it. So if the array is of plural, then the variable name for the each will be in a similar form. Okay, but the key thing is that the variable name should not be the same as yes. Other than that, this will not know what which one refers to which. Okay. So with that one you can use for each. So for each of the index of the array you can get it value. So the for each will be doing the looping from the index 0 to the last index. Then you can get those values with the variable you declared as. So you can get its variable. Okay, so we continue. So that is it for our that's the explanation, and that's the for the for each, the explanation. Okay, we've already done this once already. Okay, then arrays with multiple fields. Okay, so we need to take note of this one too. So array with multiple fields. So the previous one that we did, we have array with index. We have an array at index, then we assign the value. Then there is also a possibility to have an array with maybe several fields. For example, if you have an array for storing information of maybe people, then you need to specify the field and its value. So for information about a person, it could be the name of the person, the date of birth of the person, maybe the age of the person, the hometown of the person, and so on. So you can use the keywords to assign the values to your array. So that one, each of the arrays of also of a single index. So if you have multiples of them, then you have to put them in another array, which will continue in our subsequent ones. So there are array with multiple fields. For example, we have a person as our array. Okay, this person array has multiple fields. So we have this field. So with the field, you use a key. So you specify the key and then you assign the value. So you access the value by the key. So you access the value by the key and you assign the value by the key as well. So you assign and you access by the key that you use. So in this example, our first name, the key is first name. So if you're accessing it, if you write person square bracket person square bracket, then in our key first name, it will return what you have in the first name. Then the second one has a key last name. So then you can assign the last name inside. So if you're accessing it, it's going to be person, then the key is last name. Then this one has the key nationality. So if you're accessing it, it's going to be person, square bracket, then quotation, then the key is nationality. Then if you have person, then we have hometown, the key is station. So now you can access each of the values by their key. So like you can see this one says echo first name, then it's access this value by that name. Okay. So we have our first name. Then last name we use the key to access it. Nationality we use the key to access it. hometown, we use the key to access it. Okay, so that's how you access. You use the key to assign and use the key to access the descent. So this array has multiple fields. By how many keys does it have? One, two, three, four. Okay, so you can assign each of the keys, the values by their keys, and you can access them by their keys as well. But first, you need to declare that that variable person is an array. Then you use a key to assign the values. Okay. So in those ones, or the array will be of only one content. So the content, it has only one content, which is each of the keys that you have. Now, if you want to maybe store multiple person, more than one person, then you need to put this array also in another array so that each of the person will be at the index you specify. So if you put this array in another array, so the first one will be the first person you store will be at index 0, and the second person you store will be at index 1. The third person information you store will be at index 2, and so on. Okay, so that's where we are now. Arrays in an array. Okay. So in the case where you have multiple fields, then you want to have multiples of them, then you have to store each of them that array in an array, so that in in that array you have zero at index 0 for the array with multiple fields, index 1 the array with multiple fields, index 2 the array with multiple fields. Okay. Now in the actual programming lesson, which we will come to uh, learn, like I told you already, in the database we have a rule which has a key of different fields. So in the database, you can have a database by name, maybe a person, where we have the field, the column first name, then last name, and nationality, and hometown. Okay, so when we fetch our our database, each of the rows are going to be an array with keywords of which will be the columns. Okay, so we can put all those rows which are the array in another array. So if we get 5 rows, you have an array which has 5 sides, and each of the row or each of the array index will be our array with the fields. So, for example, if in a database we have maybe rows of maybe 2 in the person, and we have values of them, then we will also have each of the row having the person information. So we can be adding those rows. So we get 2 array size in our array, which we will be fetching from our interface session. Then we can display the information we get over there. So you need to understand this concept very well. Okay. So with multiple fields, we can also have them in an array if you have multiples of them. So a multiple field can also be in another array. So each of the fields, each of the array, you then put it in an array for storing those multiple fields. Okay. So that one we use push. So we can use push to assign the general array container which will be storing the array which has the multiple fields. So for example, this person is an array which has the multiple fields, and this array is for storing the multiple array of the multiple fields. So we have array person, and we have another array people. Okay, so now we store each of the person in the people array. So when we finish, when we assign the values of the person over here, then we put in that person array in our people array. We said that to put an array or a value in an array, we use a push. So array push, we put then our entire array with these multiple fields in this array. Then we assign another array of these fields, then we put in that array in our people array. So at index 0, it will have the array with these fields, multiple fields of this information. Then our array at index 1, it will have the array with this information. Okay. Then if we have another 3, it will have the array with that information. Okay. Then we use a for each to access each of the array values. So each of the array value is just the same way as each of the we get them by their fields. So we have our first name. Now each of the array values we define them as person. Okay, so we can access those array values by this variable. Okay, so here we can get the first name by the key first name, and the other one by the key last name, and the other one by the key nationality, and so on. Okay, so let's take an example. So, like I told you, if you are doing it, you can make this one example 2, or you can give a name to that class so that when you want to make reference to it, it will be easy. But this is just for mine, it is just demonstration script. So I'll delete the previous example I've done. It's just like a blackboard. When you are done with it, you wipe it and you do another one. But for you, you need to save your files by name so that you know where you can refer to those files if you want to make reference to some of the script that we've written. Okay, so in the multiple array, we declare an array person, okay, array. In this person, it has multiple fields, so it has fields. So we assign the value by the name of the field, so that's the key. So here, if you have first name, okay, so we have first name, that's the key. Then you can assign the value. So it can be maybe Godwin. Then we have another field in the same array. We have maybe last name. You can assign the value nation. Okay. You can have person. You can assign maybe hometown. You can assign the value person. Maybe nationality. It's equal to now because this one is a multiple array, some of the fields can be of different data types. While this one is multiple array, so each of the key have their own unique values that will be storing there. So if I have maybe date of birth or maybe salary, maybe I say salary. Okay, maybe the salary the person receive. So maybe I can write this one as maybe 2,000. Okay, so that will be for salary. So now I can have another array. So if I just want to display this one, then I can have my, so let's say for example, if I want to display this one in a tabular form, then I can create my table. So table, maybe with, maybe I do the border. Border is equal to 1. Okay. So in our table, we have our TR, TD. This is our heading, so we can have maybe first name. second column you can have last name. The second column you can have last name, then hometown, nationality, then salary. You have last name, you have hometown, this is hometown, have nationality, have salary. If you want to, you can have a key by age, so maybe person age 25. So here too you can have maybe age that, and then so you can have age over here. Okay. So these are the headings. So now we can put in our values. So we can just, because this one is one, we don't need a for loop. But in a case where there are many of them, then we can use a for each to get each of the values. But this one is just a demonstration of just a single array with multiple values. So here we put in our values. Okay. So our column 1 is for our person, which of the key first name. Okay. So we can copy this one, this, change the column name. So this one is our last name. This one is for age. So we have our age key there. And this one is for what, hometown. We have our hometown. This one is our nationality. Nationality. And this one is the salary. Okay. So we can save this, then we run and see if we not get any error. Okay. So as you can see, that is our table. So we have first name being the value we assigned by that key, and last name being value we assigned that key, the age being the value we assigned, the hometown, the nationality, and the salary. Okay, so that's basically it. So in a situation where we want to say we want to store more arrays with different several people there, then we need to declare another array where we will store each of the multiple fields inside. So in the 0, for example, will be this one. The index 1 will be another array with these fields. The index 2, 3 will be another array with these fields. Okay. So to demonstrate that one too, we can create another array we call people. Okay. So people is an array. So at index 0 of our people is going to be, so we write array push. Okay. So our people at index 0 is going to be the first information we have. Then we can just change these values and do another push so that that one will be at index 0. Okay. So in our second case, this one can be maybe Joseph. And it can be Asamoah. And then here can be Kedia. Nationality Ghanaian. And here can be 24. carry can be 1,800. Okay. Okay. Now here, since it is more than one, we can use a for loop. So here we can, in this one, we can use a for loop for it. So we can write our PHP to for loop or array. So here we'll just write PHP. Okay. Then for each, so people as person. Okay. So our HTML starts over here. Then we end it here. So I believe you are following our HTML and PHP way of it. Because we open our curly bracket here, we need to close it. So after you've written your HTML, you need to write another PHP to close your curly bracket to open your. Okay. So if it will be confusing, write your HTML, then you write your PHP first, then you close it, you open, you close and you open, then you put your HTML between it. So however you want to do it. So this is the same as this, so we don't need to change anything. We here now our person is available, we have them. So in each of the loop of the array, you get each of the rows will have this person information with these keys. So at index 0, it will have this one, the top one. At index 1, it will have this information that we have now, which will be for the index 1 will be this array. So it will have that values over there. So when we run this, we will get something like this. I haven't pushed yet. I didn't push the second one. So I need to push. Set the second one. I need to call the array push. Okay. So you need to call the array push to insert the second array value that you assign. So here now our array will have two values. Okay, so at index 0, that's the first array with this multiple fields. At index 1, that's the second array with this multiple fields. Okay, now in the database, you have these columns. So the column becomes our key. So you can access the values by the column names. Okay, so that's in the database section. So when we get to our applications, instead of here we assign the values in our person array, we can fetch it from the database. So the value, the key will be the column names, will be the key. So we can access them by the column names because that will be the key. The column names become the key, so you can access each of the array, their fields by their column names. Okay. So in the database, we fetch the value, then we store them in an array, then we pass it in the interface side where we have each of the array and their field values, so we can display it in our function. So in the actual production, this side will be on the database script. Then you just write a function that will fetch will fetch this array. Then here will be our interface, the front end. So in the front end, we will display the information we get from the database. Okay. So in summary, for the multiple fields, you need to have a key and a value. So it's an array which has multiple fields. So you need to have a key, and you can assign the value to the keys. Okay. Now to access the value to use the same key. Now if the array with multiple fields, you have multiples of them, then you have to put each of them in another array so that at index 0, it will have that array which has the multiple fields. At index 1, it will have that array which has the multiple fields. At index 2, it will have that array which has the multiple fields. Then you can use the for loop to access each of the array at each of the indices. So once you access them, so you use them for each to access each of them. So in each of them, this become one array variable. So you can access their column them by their column names. You can access the values by their column names. Then we will talk about the array push. So this array push, we assign this array to our second array. Our second array, the motive is to store our arrays with multiple fields. So this is our second array. We store the array of these arrays. So it stores these arrays. So these arrays have multiple fields. So after we saving them, assigning the values to it, we store it in this array. After we assigning the value to it, we store it in this array. So if you have another third row, third value, you can just copy this one and you can change the value. So our third name can be maybe Bokete. Okay, then it lives at it's a Ghanaian. He said it's 28 and the salary is maybe 2,200. Okay. So this is another third person's information which is in this array. Okay. So in this array, once we are done with putting the values, we can add it to our previous array. So the people array. So now the people array will have three sides. At our index 0 is this one, this array which has this information. At index 1, it is this array which has this information. At index 2, it is this array which has this information. So we'll put them inside. So remember, after having it, we will put them inside. In our, we have our database section. Instead, since those values will be an array from the database, then that one we will not call this, we will not call the array push one by one because we will look through our database rows. So that one, the values we fetch from the database, we use an array, we use to look to be fetching each of the rows. So like the way we did in the previous for each, that one too, there is also another function which is being used to look through the rows you have in the database. So you look through row 1, row 2, row 3. So each value then you be storing it in your array. Then you pass it to where you have your interface, the script for the interface. You call and get a value, then you can display it. Okay. But this is just an example to explain what is happening. So when we get to database, I'll be referring to this array stuff. So you need to master it by heart if you want to be able to be a good programmer when you get to that application development stage, so that you will not be confused. Okay. So in summary, we have an array which has single field, a single value. So for the single values, you don't specify the field name, you just assign the values then. In the single values, in the single array, one dimensional array, if your array will be of value of integer, all the rest should be of the value of integers. If it's of string, all the other values should be of string. If you interchange them, you get a syntax error. On the multiple field to, if you say the array with this value is supposed to be integer, then the rest are supposed to be integers as well. Okay, because it will be creating space for them, so you need to have them in that way. Okay, so once with the multiple field, you need a key and the value. So the key, you put them in the square bracket. For the single, you only have the index. Okay, but with the multiple and array with multiple fields, instead of the index, we assign a key so that you know where you are storing the value. So you access the value by their key. For the one dimensional, you access the value by their index. And for multiple dimension, they access the listen by their key. So you know that, oh, okay. So here in the chef example, you know that you have a chef by name first name. So this is where I have my first name. You have a chef by name last name. This is where I put my last name. You have a chef by name hometown. This is where I put my hometown information, nationality, and so on. So the difference is that in the one dimensional array, you assign the value by index. By multiple dimensional array, you assign it by keys. So you get the contents of the array by their key values. So the key name will retain the value which has been stored by that key name. Okay. Now, if you want to have multiple array, several of them, then you can put them in another array. So at index 0 will be what you put at the first multiple dimensional array you put inside. At index 1 will be the second multiple array you put them inside. Now this is just an illustration where we have a person as our multiple array example. So the person have this information. Now we will have several of them. So we declare another array to store each of them inside. Now we said you put a value in an array using the array push. So in this array push, the array which will contain the multiple array of the multiple one, we call it. So we said the array comes here first. Now in this array, it has a value of this array which has multiple fields. Then we also put in different values in this person array. Then we pass it on our people array. So at index 1, it will be this information. Then we also created another multiple array. Then we pass on to our distance. So at index 2 is going to be this information we have here. Now we need to display them at our interface side. So we created a table where we have these columns. So we have our first column is first name, our second column is last name, our third column is age, and so on. Okay, now we look through our array. So here, our people is the main array which contains each of the arrays with the multiple fields. Okay, so we will look through that one. So as we've seen in the previous one, we use a for each to loop. So we have for each. So for each of these array, you need to declare each of the array, you need to declare a variable for it. And like I said, the main array normally we use a plural. Then the ones, each of the ones we get, we use the singular. So for each people as person, okay. Now we get the value by their field name, okay. So each of the person we get them by their field name. Remember we assign the value by their key names, so you can get the values also by their key names. So here the first names we store them by the key first name, last name we store them by the key last name, age we store them by the key age, hometown we store them by the key hometown, nationality we store them by the key nationality, and salary we store them by the key salary, so you can access their values. Okay. So that's it. So when you run, we get something like this. Now I've added a third one. So when we refresh, suppose it's the third one over there. So in actual production, this will fetch them from the database, and their key will be the column names of the database. And when we fetch, then we can display them on our database. Okay, so we continue with the lectures. So now, this is just explanation of some certain practical things that you take note of. Now, in order for people to understand your code, and as well as you to understand your own code, it is important to write a very clean and neat code so that you yourself you can follow it. So, like I've already started that in the demonstration of the code we have. In the note, we have the echo, but when I'm doing the, the coding, I will do it with the HTML example. So when you see the two, even though the two does the same thing, the HTML one makes it easy if you separate your HTML from your PHP, so that even you can follow that we open this tag here, we close this tag here. So all those things are uh, programming. People do it in a different way, even though it will achieve the same thing. You also need to have it in a nicer way that you yourself, the next time you are reading your code, it will be easy for you. And if somebody else is maintaining your code, it should be also be easy for the person to follow your code. So it's very important. So one of the things you should take note is the indentation. So in the indentation, we make sure that if there is something inside uh, a script, you indent it so that it will leave a little space so that you know that this is inside that. So like an example of what I've done here. Now I could have started the TR over here, but the TR is in the table, is the child of this mother table. So I need to separate it. So if somebody is reading, the person will know that oh, this one is in this, okay, and this n over here. So they are in the same row. Their children, I've indented them. I've left a little space there, and all the children in the same line. Okay, so that's how you do that. So if there is something inside another thing, you need to separate them a little bit so that you know you can differentiate between what is in what. And the code will be nicer. So that's what we call the indentation. So even in the indentation, you may use a tab key on your keyboard. You just press the tab key, or you can press the space, one of the space, how many space you want, but it should follow in line so that you know this one is in line with the other one. Okay. So it says it is important not only that we use a style that is readable, but we use a style that is consistent across all the developers working together. Okay. So if you are working in a group, if you all be following the same way of writing your code so that it will be easy for you to understand. Okay. So in certain programming languages, indentation is very important. For example, in Flutter, if you are the public spec file, if you don't indent it well, you get an error. Same with the Python code. So in certain programming code, it is indentation is very mandatory, but PHP it is not. So that's where you need to have a good practicing, practicing at this early stage of your coding, so that by the time you get to the working field, where you're working with many people, your coding style is very good. So people will really like to work with you. But if your code is messy, even if you are a good programmer, people will not enjoy working with you because if they have to continue with your code, they will not be able to follow the code. They have to try their best to understand the code, and some may even try to make your code neater before they even start to continue, which is a whole lot of time. Okay. So at this early stage, you need to learn how to write neat codes. Okay. So this is an example where we have the comparison all on one line. Okay, so here we have each of the comparison all on one line. So we have if month is equal to September, or month is equal to April, or month is equal to June, or month is equal to November. So you can see that all these comparisons are on one line. But for a neater code, they all needs to be on their own so that it will be easy to follow. So like month is equal to September, then this one will come on a new line, then the other one will come on a new line, then the other one will come on a new line. So it will be easy to follow, to read, instead of going to the far end and see what is there. If they are all in one line, it will be easy for the person to follow. Okay. For example, as you can see, so you know that this is for one condition, the other one is for the other condition, this is for another condition, this is for another condition. Okay. So you need to follow these kinds of coding very well. we are now on constants and global variables. Okay, now what is the meaning of global? In the layman English, a global means it can be accessed everywhere. So if they say something is global, it can be in each of the countries. It's easy for you to go to each of the countries. So global is somehow also related to international. So you are not limited to only one place. One place is called local. So we have global and local variable. The local variables they can only be accessed between their curly brackets. So with the global variables, you can only access them within the curly bracket. But the global variable, every part in your script, you can refer to them and use them. Okay, so that's the difference. The local variable, once you declare a variable between the curly brackets and you don't assign the keyword global, then that variable can only be used within the curly brackets. But if you declare a variable outside the curly bracket, then all you can access that value in every part of your code. And sometimes you use the keyword global if you want local variable to be applied as a global as well. So we assign the keyword global to it as we will come to see in the example. Okay, but first we are on constant. So what is a constant? So a constant is a variable that doesn't change. The value does not change. So if it change in the colon on the later on, there will be a syntax error. Okay, so if there is a value that is not supposed to change, we declare them as constant. For example, if you are writing a code for pi, we know pi, the based on the programmer, they may change the value because of the approximation. Because pi, some may write it 3.14, some will also may write it 3.142. Okay, so for it to be consistent, you can declare it as a constant. So anyone who is changing the value, the person will get a syntax error because it has already been declared with a value at the start of the code. Okay, so that's basically what we use a constant for. Once you declare a variable as a constant and the value is changing in the subsequent code, there will be a syntax error. Okay. And if you don't declare it as a constant, then anyone can change the value, especially if you have multiple people working on the code. The person may not know the value which has been assigned at the beginning of the code, so you may also assign it a value. Okay, but if you declare it as a constant and the person is assigning a different value, the, the, the person will get an alert because you get a syntax error. Okay. So in PHP, in each of the programming languages, the way they declare their constant, some use the keyword const, others use constant, others use final, and the rest. Okay. But in PHP, we use the define. We use the define to define constant. So we use a keyword define. Then in the first argument will be the name of your constant. Then the second argument will be the value of your constant. Okay. Now, even though you can define constant uh, as any other ordinary variable name, in a good programming ethic, you need to declare constants in capital letters. So the variable names of constant, you need to put them in the capital letters. Even though when you use small letters, the lesson will not complain. But for a good programming ethic, the constants are given capital letters. Okay, so we define, then you have the value, the name of your constant. Then the second argument is its value. So this is an example. This is a program. The value of that program, the constant is program, and the value is school app. Then the second constant is version, and the value of the version is 111.7. Okay. So if you output this, you get welcome to. So this is a constant and the value of that constant is school hour. So that's our constant. So if you want to run this code, you can just copy and paste it so you can have a feel of it. Yes. So we have program. This is a constant name. Name is a value we assign to it. So our program is of the name school app. Then the version is a constant name, and we have the value over here. Okay. So remember, the naming of the constant also follows the same naming of values. You can't have a space between them. You can't start predicate and the rest. Okay. But here, the only difference that it doesn't have the dollar sign, but the same rules. But for ethical coding, like I've explained, you need to write your constant in capital letters. So if somebody is reading your code, the person knows that these are constants. Okay. So when you are assessing the value to, you don't use the dollar signs, you only use their names. So for example, here the name is program, we refer to it as program. Then the version 2, the name is version, we refer to it as version. Okay. So we assess them by their name, but both declaring and assessing them, you don't use the dollar sign. Okay. So if we run this, we will get the welcome to school version 11.7. Okay. So that is for constant. And we have the variable scope. So like I've explained, global variables. Variables declared as global can be accessed every part of the code. But for local variables, you can only access them within their curly bracket. So for example, here is a local variable. This is a local variable because it's declared in the curly bracket. So you can only use it over here. Okay. Now for global, this is a global variable because it's outside the curly, it's not in any curly bracket, so it can be referred in everywhere. So you can have it anywhere. So for example, in this and normally if a global variable is also has the same name with a local variable, it doesn't, the value does not, when you call the local variable, it doesn't affect the value of the local variable. So in this example, you can see that we have a global variable for score. So our score value is 11. So when you echo our score value, it's going to be of 11. Now you can see that we call this function. We call this function. This function has a score of 25. Okay, so it will have 25. So when we echo it, it will still be, this value will not be affected because this score is only within this curly bracket. It's not referring to this score value because this is global variable. This is local variable. So whatever happens to this variable, it doesn't have anything to do with this global variable. Okay, so like I've explained, variables between the curly brackets are called local variables. So whatever happens within the local variable, it doesn't have anything to do with the global variable, even if they have the same names, they are different. So in this example, our global variable has a value of 11. So if you display, if you echo this, it will have 11. Now if you call this function, if you expect that because our score has been assigned 25, the 11 will change to 25, no. Because this one is a global variable and this one is a local variable. So this variable is on its own. Okay, so if you echo the this value score again, it will still be 11, but it hasn't changed. Okay. Now, if the keyword global is used attached to this, then it refers to this. So that one, the 11 will change because it's being referred to as what we have in a local variable is being referred to as this global variable. So in that case, the value is going to change. So in this example, the keyword global is attached to that variable. So it means it also refers to this global variable. So in that case, whatever happens here will also affect our global variable over here. So we will try both, then we display there, you can see what I'm talking about. So in this example, this. Okay, so as you can see, our score is 11, and when we call the listening, it's still 11. Okay, so we take the second one, which qualifies it with the global. So variables which are declared in the curly brackets are local variables. So for them, whatever happens is only within the curly brackets. And for global, it can be accessed anywhere. So any change that happens to them in the curly bracket also affects their value. So here we have our global attached to it. So this is now referring to this. So when we call this function h, the value will be changed from 11 to 25 because it's still referring to this. So it's the same memory name that is being referred to. So any change we make is going to affect it. So if we run this code now, okay, so now you can see that it has changed to 25. So with local and global variable is that with global variables you can access them within all the curly brackets, but for local it's only available within its curly bracket. So if there is a global variable and local variable of the same name, any change we do to the local variable doesn't affect the global variable because we have two different types. But if you have a global variable and you call it in a local in the curly brackets, okay, so since it's a global variable you are making a change to, then that one also be affected. So we move on to so now we have found out our functions. Okay, so in this example, we saw an example of a function where we call function change for. Okay, so functions are normally scripts. We have user-defined function and the function that came with the compiler. Like the example, the arrow push is a function which has been written in PHP. So that one is a function already written. So user doesn't define that function. It's already came with the PHP environment. So that one you can call it and use it. But at times you yourself you need to write your own function. Okay. So how do you write your function? So a function starts with the keyword function. So you start with the keyword function. So we on user defined function. A function that you define yourself. Okay. A function may have an argument. So an argument can be in the form like an input where you pass in certain value to your function and because you use those values in your function. So it may have an argument, there can be empty argument or an argument with a data. Then we also have the return values. So some functions may return some values. So some functions may also not return any value, may output the result without returning any value. Then we have the function body where you have your code for your function. So whatever your function is doing in the code you want to use. So a function starts with the keyword function. The function should have a name. Just the same way we define variable. It has the same rules. You shouldn't do with a digits. There shouldn't be a space between the names. There shouldn't be a keyword. So only the same. So the keyword function you leave a space and give the function a name. The function may have an argument, or if there is no argument, it's just going to be the curly bracket. With an argument can be an input like variables that you need to pass to the function that the function will call. Then we have your function code here. So you the programmer, you write the code based on what you want the function to do. Then if the function is going to return something, then you have your return values here. So the return value can be multiplication of something or whatever the output you want to display. So these are the basic concept of a function. A function starts with a keyword function. A function has a name. You use the same naming method. Okay. A function has an argument. So an argument can be empty, or if you want to have to pass in some values of the argument, then the function may return a value. So if it's returning a value, then it's just going to return a value. Then invoking a function, which means you want to call a function. Now, when you want to call a function, it's just the function name. And if the function has a value, you have to pass in the value. If it doesn't have any arguments, then you just use the empty space for it. So it doesn't have any arguments. It's just going to be the name with this the bracket. But if it has an argument, the name, you pass in the argument, the input needs to take in between the brackets. So that is how we call it. So this is an example. We want to write a function to check if it's an even number or not. So here we pass in the number. So if it's an even, it will say. If it is not, it will say it. So that's the function we are going to write. So in our previous week, we said we use the modulus to check the remainder of the number. So we are going to use the same concept. Here we are going to check the remainder when we divide the number by 2. So if we divide the number by 2 and the remainder is 0, then it means that number is even. If we divide the number by 2 and the remainder is not 0, it means it is not an even. So a function to check if the number is an even can be function check even. Okay, now in order for us to be consistent in our coding, in functions that I'll be writing, I'll be using the function with a curly with an underscore. Okay, so this example, check even, I'll use the name, the lowercase, they are going to be in the lowercase. And if multiple words, I'm going to separate them by an underscore. Like I said, I'll be trying to teach you the good way of coding. So you need to be consistent in our coding. And in that case, when you are reading our subsequent example code, of course, in the lecture notes, the normal way will be written so that you can see the differences. But when I'm doing the illustration, I'm going to follow the consistent way of writing my function. So my functions will have a lowercase, and I'll separate the words by underscore. So for example, check even and have check then even. So I'll separate the words by underscore. Okay. Now this takes in the number we want to check if it's an even or not. So that's our argument. That's our input information. Okay. That's our argument. Okay. Now in this example, we check if it's an even, then we have to display that it's an even. We can check if for a number percentage 2, which is the remainder, is equal to 0. Okay. We say percentage is find the remainder. So if we divide by 2 and the remainder is 0, then it is an even. So we can display our placing. So we can, instead of writing echo straight, I want us to use our pH there, HTML. I have explained to you that I want you to be consistent. So here I'm going to write HTML and write my PHP inside. So echo, I'll echo the value of the number. Okay. And I'll continue with my HTML is even and finish it. So else, I just echo that it is not even. So this function doesn't return anything, it just displays an information based on whether the number is even or not. So I can say it's odd. And if it's not even, then it's going to be odd. Okay. So this is a function. So our function starts with a keyword function. Then you give it a name. So it follows the same naming lesson. But in my example, I'm telling you the subsequent example, when I'm going to write the name of function, I'm going to put in a lowercase. I'm going to separate the words by underscore so that if somebody is reading, the person can figure out the different words. Okay. And this function has an input, which is the value we will have to pass in when we will call the function. So here is the number. Okay. Now what this function does is I check if a number is even or not. So we check if we set the percentage, check the remainder. So if we divide the number by 2, that's the meaning of this, the percentage is the remainder. So if we divide by 2, the remainder that we get, if it is 0, then it's an even number. If it is not, then it is an odd number. Okay. So now we can call this function. So we can have a variable number or num, which we can give it a value of 3. Okay. Now we can call our function to check even, then we pass in our value there. Okay. So like we said, if invoking a function or calling a function, it's just the name of the function. And if the function will output something, then if the function takes as an argument, it takes in an input. You make sure you pass in that input. If you don't pass, you get an error because it will be expressing you to pass in that value. Okay, so this one, 3, here, our number will be 3. So it will be 3 divided by 2. 3 divided by 2 will have a remainder of 1. So since it is not 0, it's going to be an odd. Okay, so when we run this, you get 3 is odd. We can have something like 6. We can change our number to 6. We change it to 6. So you can see 6 is even. Okay. So if I don't put my arguments here and I run, suppose we get an error. But it's expecting me to pass in something. Okay, so you can see pattern error. Okay, so this is just to demonstrate to you that if a function takes in an input, you have to pass in that input. Other than that, you get an error. If the function doesn't take any inputs, then you don't need to have any input inside. It's just going to be the bracket. Okay, so we can continue. Okay, so we continue. So we've seen this example. Okay. Now we are going to write another function. This time it will check whether it's an even number or not. So here it's going to return true or false. If it's an even number, it's going to return true. If it's not an even number, it's going to return false. Okay. So in this case, here in our function we have, so here normally if we want to check if something is even or not, or true or false, we use is. So we have is, then an underscore even. Okay, so it's even. So here if it's even, here we'll just return true. Okay, so here our return value is going to be true. Okay, if it is not, we are going to return false. Okay, so in this case we only check if it is true or false. So when checking if something is true or false, we use the if condition. So we have if, then call our function. So it's even. It's even. Okay. The function takes in number. Okay. Okay. So here, this part of the function is going to return true or false based on the value we have. If this is even, it's going to be true. If it is not, it's going to return false. Okay. And this is our if argument. So if argument has this bracket over here and over here. Okay. So now we can have our curly bracket. Okay. Now if this returns true, all that we need to do is to display, to write our display information. So in our display information, like I told you, I'm going to use the 18 mode. So I am closing my PHP here. So I can write my 18 over here. So I have P, and I want to display the number. So echo num. I have this given over here. Okay, I close my P. So else means it is false. It returns false. So if it is false, I can just display that it is odd. display that. So this is an example of a function that returns something. So here is because we are checking if it is or not, we return true or false. So if we check if it's an even, we divide by 2 and the remainder is always even, so we return true. The other thing is false. Okay. Someone can also do it in a different way where it will declare maybe a variable you can call is even and make it false by default. So you can set it as false. Okay. So if it is even, you can set it to be true. So it's even, you can set the value to be true. Okay. So you can set the value to be true. But anyway, first of all, let's run this one before we do the change so that you can see that they do the same thing. Okay. So let's run this code first before we do the change. So you can see that it returns the same result. So you see that it's even. Okay. So if I change it to 5, it's odd. Okay. So that. So here it returns true or false. So we check that if whether it is true or false, then we call the function. So when you pass in the value, if it is true, you know that it is even. If it is false, you know it is odd. And someone can also declare a variable for boolean. So you can say it's even and set it to be false by default. Okay. So if you check and it is even, then you can reset this one to true. So it's even, you can set it to be true. Okay. So after it has checked, then it will return the value of our is even. Okay. So it returns the value of our is even. So if it doesn't come here, if this condition, if this is not the 0, it will not come here. So it will still be false. So it will return false. Okay. But if this condition is true and it came here, the value will change to true. So if it return, to return true as a value over here. So they both do the same thing, but the different approaches. Okay. So as you can see, they do the same thing but different approaches. So we've seen a function that doesn't return anything and a function that returns something. So our first example, this function doesn't return anything. It just displays the information whether it is even or not. Okay. Now in our second example, it returns true or false. So that's the return type. So we have more examples. So it says write a function that prints out welcome to advanced web programming. Okay. So in that function doesn't return anything. So when you call that function, it's just to print out something. So we can write this code as so I can delete this one. So you can say function welcome. So this function I can just write a PHP, HTML code. So I can write an HTML welcome to advanced web programming. So if I call this function by just the name, now this function doesn't have any input, so I just call it with an empty bracket. So if I call this function, it will execute what I have here, which is just a HTML code, which says welcome to advanced web program. Okay, so refresh. Okay, so you can see just display welcome to advanced web program. So write a function that takes two numbers and return the sum of the two numbers. Okay, so here the function will return. So we call the function sum. Okay, so you have the keyword function. When you call it sum, then it takes two numbers. So 1 2. It says it retains. What do they say? That the phone that is 2 numbers and retain the sum of the 2 numbers. So retain. So I can have retain 1 plus 2 because the sum 1 plus 1. The second one, it says the product, write a phone that is 2 numbers and retain the product of the 2 numbers. So the product, so the second one is product. The product is multiplication. We have product. So instead of addition, it's going to be plus. So these are the functions. So it takes 2 inputs. So those are 1 and 2. Then in this function, the sum has the 2. So you add 1, 2, these 2 numbers. The product it multiplies. Then we've already seen that multiplication in programming is star. So we have the star. Now you can call this function. So I can have my 1 equal to 2, maybe 3, and 2. In the variable naming, it's not necessary that the same name is over here can be here. This one can be 1. I can have 1 here. I can have 2 here. So the naming doesn't matter, that it should be carried with the arguments. They are 2 different things. So 2 can be just maybe 5. Okay. Now I can call this function in my code to just add the sum in multiplication. So I can write in my HTML code. Then I can have my P here. And I can echo the number 1. Okay. So it will have the value of 1. So plus. And I can echo my number. So this one will be the value of this. So this one will be 3 and plus. This one will be 5. Then equal to. Okay. So the sum is the function that we call. So we have our PHP. Then we call our function sum. Our function sum takes in 1, 2, 2. Okay. So the result, it returns the result. So in our P. Okay. So this P, we ended our P. Now here, our 1, we want to display its value. So that's for this PHP script. Then our plus test. Then our 2, we want to display its value. So that is, then we have our equal to test. Then here, we call our sum function. So our sum function, we call this function, then add the 2, then it will return the result. So here we have 3 plus 5, which will be 8. So our value over here is going to be 8 because our function returns the sum of those 2 numbers. Okay, then we can also call that of our product. So that of our product here can be multiplications. Here we call our products. Okay, that's it. Refresh. Okay, so as you can see, we have our value for our 1 variable, value for our 2 variable, then we have our equal to. Now when we call the function, our function added the 2 of them, then it returns the result. So the result is 8. Then when we call our product function, it multiplies the 2, it returns the result. So the product of 3 and 5 is 15. So if we change our values right here, it is 6, and it's still 5. Here is going to be 6, and here is going to be 5. Then equal to, so the sum of them here is going to be 11. Then here is going to be 6. Then the multiplication of it, so 6 times 5 is going to be 30. So here is going to be 30. So when we refresh, that's our value. So that's our value. Okay. So I hope everything is clear. Okay. So that's our values. So that those are the strings. The sum, welcome, product. So like I told you, in this code, I'm echoing them as a normal way of displaying because we say echo is displaying information. But in my example that I'm writing, every HTML code, I'll put in HTML elements. So you can see the two, the one you decide, but I wish you could be the one that I do my coding so that you can be consistent. And also your code, you separate the HTML so you can easily analyze your code and figure out where an error might be coming from. Okay, so quality name. So when you are writing the function, the name should reflect what the function is doing. So as you can see in my example, anyone that sees my function sound knows what the function is about. Anyone that sees our function product, if the person knows the meaning of product means multiplication, then this one can also be, the person will fully understand. If that someone says welcome, the person will know it's print out a welcoming message. Okay. So make sure that the names of your function should tell you what the function does. You shouldn't write a function that it will be difficult to, the names are difficult to understand. For example, if you name a function for bar, how will the person know what the function is about? Okay. So make sure that your functions are of good names that even if you don't explain the function, what the function is doing, the person can even guess what the functions are doing. Okay. Now functions in the class are called methods. So if the function is written in a class, they are called methods. So with that one, we don't refer to them as a function. We normally refer to that as a method. Okay, so if somebody is saying methods, it's also is a function which are written in a class. So in our subsequent week, we are going to talk about classes. So in that one, you have functions in the class. So if you have a function which has been declared in classes, these functions are no longer called functions, they are called methods. Okay. So even though it's a function, we refer to in the programming term as a method. So this is an example. We call class by the keyword class so that the component is a class. And classes also have names, just like we have the function names. The classes has names, also has names. Okay. So we have the class name, then we have our curly, we open a curly bracket here, we end a curly bracket over here. Then the classes have variables. So a class can have a variable. The variables can either be public or private. Later on, we'll talk what public variables are and private variables are. Okay. Then the class can have functions, so list of functions. So the functions we wrote, for example, can be in this class. So we can call them anytime we want. Okay. So in the subsequent week, we will see more examples of this. But this is just to give you an idea that the function in the class is being referred to as methods. Okay. So next week we'll talk what a class is, how you can declare a class, and how you can call a class. Okay. So next week, I hope you enjoy the class as well. So let's take a revision of what we've done so far to end the class. When we talk about an array, so an array has an advantage over declaring a variable when you are going to have a huge variables to use. A single array, a one-dimensional array, can contain as much as you want. So instead of maybe you have a student of maybe 1,000, then instead of declaring a variable for each of the students, like student 1, student 2, student 3, student 4, student 5, student 6, and so on up to 1,000, and assigning each of them their values, you can declare an array of size 1,000, so that each of the index of the array will be the value of the student. So in the 0, you can put a student by name, maybe Kofi a day. In the 1, you can put a student by name Robination. In the 3, you can put a student by name Mariama Mohammed, and so on in that order. So you declare one array variable, but you can put as many values as you want using their index numbers. And you can access those values also using their index numbers. So that's a one-dimensional array. So one-dimensional array is just all arrays in PHP. We use a keyword array so that we know that that variable is an array. So the variable name, $variable name is equal to an array. And the name we name our variable array is the same as the way we name our variable. Okay. Now you assign the value using their index. So the name of your array in their index is equal to the value. Now remember, the arrays, a one-dimensional array, the variable data type should be the same. If the variable data type is string, all the subsequent values at the indexes should be string. If it's going to be integer, all the other index values should be integer. If it's going to be maybe another array, all those values should also be the other array as well. Okay, so it should be of the same data type. Okay, so we said we assign the value to their index, we can get the value by their index. So student names 0 is equal to means that we are assigning after our index 0, we are assigning the value at the to it. So if we echo student underscore $student names underscore $student underscore names at 0, it's going to display a J, and that of 1 is going to display Kofi, and that of 2 is going to display Amma, and that of 3 is going to display Forte, and that of 4 is going to display Ajay, Adua, and so on. Okay. Now we use array push. It's a method which has already been written for you in PHP. So you use array push to assign values into your array. So here it takes in, okay, so like now that we've talked about function, I can also use this already written function in PHP. So you can see that this function takes in 2 arguments. It takes in the array name and it takes in the value you want to put in the array. Okay, so this is already written function. And you can also see how the function name is written. So they are using a lowercase and separate the words by an underscore. So that's the same format I would like us to be using in our actual coding examples. Okay. In the lecture notes, I will have the other way, and when I'm coding, I will have the actual way so that we can be consistent in our coding. So that when I'm writing the code, you easily understand my code. Okay. So in the array push, it's already written function in PHP. You only call it if you want to add the value to an array. Okay, so instead of using the index, you can use an array push. It's just the name of the array and the value you want to put in the array. So if the last index is 0, when you add it to, you add it to at index 1. If there is nothing added at all, the first addition will be at index 0. And so we took an example. We also said you can access the relation by the index. You can also access an array by using the loop, whether a while loop or a for loop. Any of the loops work. Just that the index is not going to be your variable, your control variable. So if you are using $I, so it will start from 0 and so on. Now if your array is going to start from the top to the bottom, then your I should be initialized to the size and the size of the array less than by 1. Okay, so to do an illustration, let's say for example, we have, numbers. So maybe we have maybe an array. Okay, now array num at 0 is equal to, let's say, 2, and nums at maybe 1 is equal to 4, and nums at, let's say, 2 is equal to, let's say, 6. Okay, now if I want to display from the highest to the lowest, from the 0 to there's 1. Then I can have my for loop. So for my I is equal to count. So here is going to be count of my norms minus 1. Okay. So here I can put this one in the bracket. So you can do the calculation in the value. So here my initial value is supposed to be 1 less than the size of the array. Of course, this one I already know the size to be 1, 2, 3. So I can write the I is equal to 2 because I know the index will start from 2. But in the case where you don't know the actual size of the array because you are using array push and you can't estimate how much information you store in the array, then here the size is supposed to be count. So you call the count function so that it will count how many elements you have in the array. Okay, so in this example, it will count how many elements we have in our array. Then we have to subtract by 1 because our last index is of size 1 less. Okay, so so here our I should be greater than or equal to 0 because we are going to end at 0. Here, because we are starting from the top to the bottom, we're going to minus minus. Okay, then we can echo our destiny. So we can write our HTML code over here to display our results. So here we have our P, then we can echo our norms at our index I, okay, and our P. So here is going to display 6, 4, and 2 because we are starting from the last index. So the key thing is that your last index should be 1 less than the size of your array. And that if you don't do that and you are using the size, you get out of bound. Like I have already told you that if you are using an array which the index doesn't exist, you get an error. Okay, why? Okay, I didn't put echo here. So echo our value at index 1. Okay, so here. Now remember, in your PHP, echo is very important. If you leave the echo, the value will be there, but because you don't echo, nothing will display on the screen. So the echo keyword is very important. So like I told you, we display from our last index, the next in the first index in that order. So if you are displaying from the top to the bottom, make sure that your initialized value of your lesson should be 1 less than your size of your array. Okay. Of course, if you know the size, you can put the last index value there. But in most situations, you don't know the size of your array because it's going to be dynamic. So you don't know how much data you have. So that one, you need to call this function count array. So give the how many elements you have in array. So your index will be 1 less than the size of your array. So you have to subtract 1 from the size of the array. So you know the last index. And you can look through from the last index to the bottom, the first one. Okay, so that is it for the array. Then we came to multiple dimension array where you have array with different fields. So the array with different fields. Then we said we can also use the for each to access the array where you have the array name here. Then we have pass. So the as here you declare the variable which for accessing the value. Then you access them by their key. If there is any key, but if there is no key, by just their name. Okay, so in one dimensional you just access them by their name. By multi-dimensional array you get the values by their keys. Okay, so this is the multi-dimensional array where you have multiple fields. So in the multiple fields, okay, this one is still the one-dimensional array, just one field, using the for each, the for loop and the for each. Then we came to multiple fields array. So in the multiple fields array, you have to have the key and the value, key and the value, and you access the values by their keys. So in this example, first name we have it value, last name we have nationality, we have it value, and we have it value. And to access them, the array name, their key, their field names. So here, first name has this key, so we call it in the square bracket. You should remember that in the one-dimensional array, here we will use the index. But in multiple field array, we use their keys for accessing their values. We use their keys to access their values. Now we have an array in an array where we have multiple array. We are putting each of them in another array. So that one, you declare your multiple array, you put their value, then you declare one array that will be putting all those arrays which has multiple fields inside. So we have people as an example. Then we put each of our arrays with the multiple fields inside. Then we can look through them. So when you look, we have the for each loop where this one is our array. But the array name is going to be the array which has the array which we put in those arrays with our multiple fields. So we have for each people as here each of our array with multiple fields, we let give it a name. And we can access each of them by their fields. Okay. Then we come to coding styles. We said you should indent your code so that you know what is in what. So it will be easy for people to understand your code. So if I'm coding, you can see that in the for loop, for example, or in the loop, I leave an indent before I start to write the code so that you know that this is in this, that order. So when people are reading your code, it's going to be easy. The way you name your functions and your variables too should be consistent. If you decide to separate your variable name by underscore and write them in small letters, you should be consistent in that. So you can write them in that way. If you decide to write your functions with where it's being separated and they are in small letters, you should be consistent. And when you are writing the constant, your constant variable should be in capital letters. Okay. And we said constant, we use a defined keyword. Then in the defined keyword, there's two arguments. It takes the name of the constant and its value. And when you are writing the constant, you make sure the constants are in capital block. Now, the name takes the same format, the same rules, just that it doesn't have the dollar sign, but the same rules shouldn't have a space between them. You shouldn't use a digit, so on. You should use a keyword and all those things. So that is it. Ideally, the ethical coding, your constant should all be in capital block, just like you can see over here. Then we also came to the scope of variables. So we have the global variable and the local variables. Local variables are in the curly brackets. So whatever, if you have both local variable and global variable of the same name, whatever happens in the local to the local variable doesn't have anything to do with the global variable. So it will not change the value of your global variable when you call that function because it is only in your curly brackets. Okay. And a global variable can be accessed anywhere. So when you call it, your PHP will not tell you it's undefined. The variable is undefined if it's a global variable and you call it the function. But if you have a function, a variable in your curly brackets, and you are calling it outside your curly bracket, it's going to give you an error because it will tell you it is undefined. Okay, so for example, if we have maybe a function, maybe we have this function, maybe display name, display, let's say display, and we have name is equal to nation. Okay, now if we are calling our name over here, so if you write a script, let's say we write P, we have PHP echo name. Okay, now if you are calling this name outside the curly bracket, you get a syntax error that name is undefined because this name is only for this curly bracket. So it's a local variable and this is a global variable because it's outside your curly bracket. So if you haven't declared it, okay, so you can see that it's saying it's undefined variable name because you haven't declared it yet. So the name over here is different from this name. So for example, if I declare it over here, name is equal to maybe Kofi. Okay. Now here, now when I echo my name, it's going to be Kofi because I've declared my name already. So this name is different from this name. This name, if you echo, if you have this one, P echo name. Okay. Now, if you call this function, display. So if I call this display, okay. So my display has its own value. So here, this name is only over here. So it will have the value of this one here. So maybe if I call my display first before I call my name over here, some will think that okay, someone may think that because I call this function here, when it came here, that this name should no longer be Kofi because I've changed it over here according as shown. Okay, but I should know that this name is referring to it's a local variable. It's only referring to what is between here. And this one is global variable. It's outside all curly brackets. So this one over here is referring to what is here. And this one is referring to only what we have over here. So this will display this. This one is a global, it's outside the curly bracket. So it's being referred to as, it's referring to this one. So if you display, okay, so you can see that we are getting two names because even though they have the same variable names, they have different types. This is the one available only within this curly bracket. And this name is global variable. You can access it over where. So this name is accessed outside the curly bracket. So it's accessing this global variable there. Okay. So local variables are only within the curly brackets. We know what the curly bracket is. So this one between here and here. The variables we have inside there, they are called local variables. Global variables are outside your functions. So if they are outside your functions, you can access them everywhere you want. Okay, so that is it for our scope of variables. Then the scope of variables after that, we came to our function. We said functions should have a name. A function, we use the keyword function. It should have a name, the same way we name variables. But I also told you that in my subsequent demonstrations, my function names are going to be lowercase with an underscore between the words. So those ones will separate the names and so that if somebody is reading, the person can separate the words and understand what the function name means. And you should choose a name that connotes what the function is about. And when you are calling a function, it's just the function name. And if the function takes in an argument, you make sure you pass in an argument when you are calling the function, and that you get a syntax error. So in this example, the function takes in. Okay, so a function should have the keyword function. I'm going over again. Should have the keyword function. Should have the name just the same way we name variable names. Okay. Then if the function should take in an argument, if you have the argument here, then we process those arguments of variables, which we call the arguments of parameters, and we process them inside. Some functions may return a value, some functions may not return a value to a display, process and display, or store something to a database or whatever the function does. So with the programmer, you decide what the function will be doing. Okay. Then to call the function, you need to call it by its name before invoking a function, but you invoke it by its name. So this function, the same name over here. The function has an argument to pass in the inputs for that function, which is over here. And once you call that function, the block of code, whatever you put between the block of code will what goes in the block of code depends on you, the programmer who wrote that function. Okay. And we came to see examples of other functions. This is even. Check if a number is even or not and returns true or false. So this one is a type of function that returns something. So it's either return true or false. Then we have, so when you call it, here true or false, we use the if condition to check if the value is true or false based on what the function returns. Okay, so if it returns true, we know it's an even number. If not, we know it's an odd number. Then we can display whatever we want to display. Yeah, we have a function to write welcome to. In this function, we just display welcome to our programming underscore. And this function returns the sum of the input values we pass to the function. This function returns the product of the input value passed to the function. Then we have, when you choose the name of a function, make sure you choose a name that is easy to understand. So if the person have not gone through what your function is doing, this by the name, the person will have an idea of what the function will do. Then we come to a class. This is just an introduction to what you'll be learning next week. Then a class also contains functions. Okay, but functions in the class are normally referred to as methods. So if somebody is referring method, it's just referring to a class, a function which is in the class. So a function in a class is being referred to as a method. Okay. So I believe this week notes has been self-explanatory. If you have any question, please contact me. Agree is very, very important. Okay. So enjoy the rest of your day. And if you have any question, you know where to contact me. So you go to the home page of the course. Then if you log into qchats.com, if you don't have an account, you need to create an account. So if you log in to your qchat.com, then once you log in, the session will be chat with an instructor. So if you log in, here it's going to be chat with an instructor. So you can just click, then you can chat with me. But if you haven't logged in, it will tell you to log in or create an account. So once you log in and you come to the home page of the course, and you click chat with an instructor, you'll be taken to a chat box where you can send me a message. Okay. So if you have any question, please, array is very, very important. So if you have any question, make sure that you fully understand before the subsequent weeks, because we'll be using array a lot in our projects that we'll be writing for this course. So have a lovely day.